Alright, Morgan. Here's what I'm seeing for your squat, bench, and deadlift. So, for your squat, one thing you can try out is that you do a high bar position. So, you might want to try out a low bar position you've never tried out before to see how that feels and see if you're stronger that way. So, it's not true for everyone, but a lot of people are stronger with the low bar position just because you're getting more contact with the bar onto the back. Also, it's closer to the hips, and it gets a little bit more of the posterior chain into the movement. So you may try it out, and it may end up feeling more comfortable and stronger in the long run. Your walkout's pretty solid. Um, the other issue, which you can't hear on here because it's not recording the sound from the video, it's recording the sound from the microphone. But you like to let your air out when you're about like halfway or three-quarters of the way up. And so what that's going to do when you let your air out is losing your position. So you're losing your pressure in your stomach, you're losing your tightness against your belt, and if you do it too soon, then you might lose position and fail to lift. It's also possible that you might relax too much and tire yourself out on a multiple rep set, or maybe even increase the chance of injury. Not sure, but it's also a possibility. So what you want to do is hold your breath for the entire rep until you lock out. Then once you're locked out, you can let your air out, breathe, and take a new breath. So if you Google the Valsalva maneuver, you can see what I'm talking about. It's pretty much what everyone does, which is taking a breath deep into your belly, bracing against the belt, and holding that breath for the entire rep to stay tight. Okay. The other thing you can see you have a little bit of an issue with is your knees shooting back too fast. So if we just watch your knees in the squat, you can kind of see how they shoot back right there, and then they kind of hold their position. So you don't want the knees to shoot back too fast. You want them to kind of slowly go back during the entire range of motion. What happens when they shoot back too much is the knees go back, which then also means the hips go back, which means the torso tips over. So you're using most of your legs early in the movement without much vertical bar movement, and then you have to use more of your back to finish the lift. So if we kind of pause it in the bottom, we'll see your knees are all the way here, and then you already pretty much already moved this much, even though you've only done maybe a quarter of your squat. And then you're pretty much here, your shins are vertical, and you still have maybe half the squat to go. So thinking about keeping your knees forward, flexing your quads kind of helps to keep the knees forward so they track back more smoothly, would also help as well. But it's not that bad. Some people shoot back really fast. Yours just shoots back a little bit at the beginning, and then you kind of maintain it. You can kind of see too with your hips. You can kind of see your hips are here, and then they kind of shoot back into the person behind you, spotting you, and then they come forward again. So just a little thing you can work on your squat. All around your squat is pretty good though. Though maybe you want to try out low bar to see how it feels, and then holding your breath the entire time to stay tight. For bench press, that's the one that we were talking the most. Um, on this one, you don't have your setup or your descent. You just have from the chest up. So one thing what we discussed already is that kind of tuck your elbows in a lot and you touch really low. You're touching on your belly. So one thing you might want to try is this. I think might be like pinky on the rings. So you might want to try going out to your ring finger on the ring. So you're just going one finger out on each hand just to start, and maybe keeping the elbows out a little bit more to touch a little higher. So you're going to be touching maybe on the lower chest instead of on the belly. And then maybe after couple weeks or a month of doing that and getting used to that, then maybe you try going out to a middle finger on the ring. So going on another finger, same thing with the elbows out, and again you'll be touching on the lower chest, and that's going to help you get possibly into a better press off the chest, shorter distance, use a little bit more chest, not rely completely on the triceps. Because the issue you're having right now with tucking so much and touching so low is your first movement is you press straight up and then you press back towards the rack instead of pressing back towards the rack and up at the same time. So what happens when you press straight up is you get in a bad position, you're making it a lot harder on yourself. So as soon as we see this play, you kind of get stuck right there because you push straight up and you made the lift harder for yourself, and then you're able to recover yourself and push back. If you had just kept pushing straight up, you would have missed that lift, but you can see it's almost like two-part movement, up and then back, up and then back. So what we wanted to do is be one smooth motion. And also, if you look at your torso, you can kind of see as soon as you press, your torso kind of drops down a little bit. You lose your positioning a little bit. So right there, you just drop down a little bit. So the difference between here, nice big arch, big belly, to here, you're starting to drop a little bit. So part of that is just losing tightness in your arch. So you're losing your arch. The other thing is also because you're pushing the bar straight up. So you're pushing in a bad position and you're losing also your torso position. So making it twice as hard as on yourself. Fortunately on this rep you're able to recover. I think you also let your air out on bench press too, which again is going to make you lose this position. It's going to make you lose this arch and maybe miss your lift. So again, just like on the squat, you want to hold your breath for the entire time until you lock out, and then once you locked out, then you can take your breath, get tight again, and do your next rep. So that's the big thing on the bench press, is not pushing straight up into the air, because that's just going to make the bar be farther from your shoulder joint and make it harder. We want to push back towards our face or back towards the rack, and letting the elbows turn outwards a little bit. So that's the big thing on bench. Deadlift all around looked pretty solid from the video I have of you from the front. Same thing with letting the air out on deadlift, especially because of the three lifts, your lockout on the deadlift is the slowest compared to your squat and your bench lockout are fine. So that means when you're in your hardest position, which is your deadlift lockout, you don't want to let your air out, because then that's going to collapse your stomach, and then maybe your rib cage will drop, and then you'll lose your lift at lockout. You'll get stuck on the legs and you won't be able to finish it. So most important for your deadlift, because of the slow lockout, is to make sure you're holding your breath, you finish the lift, and then you can breathe. Can't tell for sure from here, but most likely the reason why you're having the slow lockout is because you're rounding your back a little bit. So it looks like the lower back might be rounded a little bit here. So when you have the rounded lower back, it's going to make it easier off the ground, but it's going to make it harder at lockout. So if you're able to keep a straight back off the ground, it's going to make it a little harder off the ground, but it's going to be easier to lock out. And in the long run, the straight back is going to be better, because you can just develop the strength to break it off the ground while keeping your back safe. When you round your back, rep after rep after rep, it's going to keep putting stress on lower back, and then eventually it's possible you get some kind of injury, a bulge disc or a herniated disc. So you really want to focus on doing your reps with a straight back and building that strength off the ground, and then your lockout will be easy because your back is straight. You'll be able to push your hips through easy rather than trying to unravel yourself. One thing I've found that helps me with keeping my back straight is not cranking my neck. So when you crank your head up like this and you crank your neck back, it makes you feel like your back is straight, but really you're just tricking yourself into thinking that your back is straight. And also it makes it harder for me to kind of sense or feel where my back positioning is. But if you pull your head down into a neutral position, so in line with your spine, and you kind of look down at the ground, then you're better able to feel what your position of your back is. Just like if you were standing up straight, you wouldn't kind of crank your neck back. So like this, if you were keep the spine in line with the head pointed down, looking towards the ground, you kind of figure out what it feels like for your back to be straight, and then you're able to keep it straight and in a better position for all your reps, and then that'll be safer and stronger in the long run. So those are things that I think you need to improve on squat, bench, and deadlift. Squat's probably the best one. Probably feels the most natural for you too. Bench is probably the easiest fix. Just moving the grip out a little bit, moving the elbows out a little bit, and pushing back towards the rack. You probably figure that out in maybe a week or two. Deadlift, fixing that round back is probably the hardest. Depending on the person, you might have to drop down the weight a lot and focus on doing a lot of reps with a straight back, and it might take months before you can pull with a straight back for reps, and then it might take even more months to be able to pull with a straight back for a 1 rep max. So that'll probably be the hardest one to fix, but also probably the most important because it's the most dangerous as far as injury. All right, hope that helps. Bye.